Hi, and welcome to FireTech Talk and part 2 of our discussion with Karalynn on contract law and construction. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right back into it.
Absolutely.
If an FED does discover a dangerous provision in the contract, what steps need to be taken, and what is the best method to remove an unfair clause?
So I think, first off, is that, because some guys just like to sign the contract without reading, take the time to read the contract. And then, like I said, let's find out where the risks are, whatever it is. And then you go back with, okay, like so the pay when paid clause, for example. You go back to the general contractor or the project manager and say, hey, this provision is asking me to take 100% of the risk of non-payment, and I as a company cannot take that risk, but let's come up with something in the middle. So some obligations that some like meet in the middle I've had on that one is, you know, if the owner doesn't pay you and it's been 30 days and it's not my fault you didn't get paid, you'll pay me half of the pay app. A negotiation works when you're like, hey, I can't agree to this and here's why and here's a suggestion, as opposed to just crossing it out. Because I know a huge topic is like, well, if I don't sign it, they're not going to hire me. But then at the same time, they're asking you to take these huge risks that your company, if you're going into this knowing what you're signing, wouldn't take.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some give and take. So the process is review, find risk, tell them why it's a risk, and then an option to negotiate or to meet in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share some real life stories with us that can help us know how to avoid unfavorable outcomes whenever it comes to contracts?
Absolutely. So that's some of the talks I've been giving, but a lot of my experiences actually has come at my clients signing the contracts and then things going south. So, and I think, so I wrote a book called Quit Getting Screwed about subcontracts. And the reason that I wrote that book is because my client at the time had signed a contract. And he did all the work. He was out there working, and he didn't get paid for like 120 days. And he wasn't that big of a company, so he maxed out his credit line. He did everything he could, but he couldn't afford to keep going, and so he had to walk the job. And so he sues because he's owed all this money. And we find out through the process that the general contractor he was working for was submitting the pay apps incorrectly to the owner, which was a school, I believe, and so they were not getting paid on time, which wasn't his fault, but he still wasn't getting paid. But they didn't breach the contract by not paying him. He breached the contract by leaving the job because he wasn't paid, and so then they sued him, and it cost them more than his contract to finish the job, and so they got a judgment against him. And I got real mad. And I said, why is nobody saying anything about these contracts and what's in here? Because he was just trying to go out there and do a good job.
Right.
And what he did, and he still lost everything. So, I mean, that's a very extreme example, but there's, that's what could happen.
So when you say read the contract, you really mean read the contract.
Or, and that's the thing is that contracts, especially subcontracts, have gotten like to be in Greek.
Yeah.
So, which I don't understand the purpose of that. So, have somebody find the risk for you in there. And so what I tell my clients is plan for the cost of a contract review in your bid.
Sure.
So that way it's already built in, you know what it's going to cost. I know my firm does it on a flat fee. Yeah. And that way and you have the time. And trust me, you look like a much better, more educated contractor. You go back like, hey, I can't do this, and here's why.
Sure. Well, if you're buying a house, you have an inspection done. If you're buying a car, hopefully you have some kind of inspection done as well. So with contract, it makes a ton of sense that you would want to have somebody else review it before you sign into that.
Exactly. And if somebody comes back and said, no, we're not making any changes, trust me, you don't want to work for them.
Yeah.
That's just a bad sign anyways.
Can you give us a list of some things to keep in mind when reviewing and negotiating clauses in a contract so they ultimately are fair to all parties?
Yeah, so we went over one of the big ones, which is the pay when paid. There are a couple other ones that I think are generally missed. So one of the big ones is when you bid a project, you put your bid out there and it's accepted. And most contractors think that that's what they're hired to do, is what's in their bid. And that's technically not the case because the bid does not become part of the contract. When the subcontract comes out, there's a scope of work attached, which may or may not be the same as the bid. And so I've seen it time and time again that they don't review the scope, they just sign the contract, and then later on they're in the middle of the project and they didn't realize that the scope is actually quite a bit larger than their bid. But that's the contract they signed, and so now they're on the hook to do the difference. Yeah. And so what I tell my guys is like, when you get that scope of work back, review it as if you were bidding the project again and make sure those numbers match. Absolutely. If they don't, have them change it before that you sign, because what you sign is what you sign. It doesn't matter what they say down the line, that they said they would change it or whatever. So another big provision is change orders in these subcontracts. So the first thing you want to look at in the subcontract is the technicals of it. Who can approve it? What does the form look like? You know, because a lot of these say like the project manager on site can't approve change orders, so you got to get somebody higher up. So knowing that on the front end. The other part is like, okay, what happens if we can't agree on a price?
Sure.
Some of these subcontracts say, if we can't agree on a price, you're just going to have to wait till the end of the project and then we'll decide, which that's unrealistic, right? So we try to negotiate a cost plus 15% for overhead, right? I've seen another one that said, I'm going to send you a request for a change order. If you don't respond within 2 days, you agree that there's no extra charge. So, you know, there's a whole gamut in there, but those are some of the bigger ones that I tell my clients to watch out for.
So I think everything you've said is really amazing. For FEDs specifically, if they're either on the fence about legal counsel or they're trying to figure it out, and they do have existing contracts, are there absolute do's and don'ts they need to be looking for currently and in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they need to find legal counsel. That's one thing. It's like, even if you don't need us right now, trying to find us when you're in a crunch is it's just a pain in the butt. So, you know, do some research, find somebody in your area that's familiar. And that's the big thing, is that you can find contract attorneys anywhere, but a construction contract attorney knows the industry. And it doesn't take long talking to an attorney to know whether they know construction or not, right? So take the time to interview find out someone that really knows your industry. So when they're reviewing your contracts, they know what to watch out for. They know what to look for. Absolutely. So that's thing number one. And then also have them on board with a consistent collection strategy. Like I said, that's a huge part, and I think it doesn't get talked about enough, how contractors really do have rights that are, you know, lien rights against the owner, against the property. And I think that's a huge part that needs to be built into a contractor's business, and that should be on the front end with great legal counsel.
Absolutely. Well, Karalynn, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think it's been incredibly interesting, and I'm sure our audience will love it as well. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to the Brooks YouTube channel for more great content like this, and we'll see you next time.